Hi everyone, welcome to this tutorial on price discrimination. In this tutorial we are going to go over a true-false uncertain statement, and then we are going to go over different type of price discrimination that happen in real life, and we'll determine whether they are first degree, second degree, third degree, or if it's not price discrimination at all. Okay, let's get into it. If a monopolist knows that its customers have identical preferences, it can raise its profit by using a two-part tariff instead of a linear price. It is true. Imagine that the monopolist is applying the inverse elasticity rule to compute the optimal price and quantity. Then we know that this price will be higher than in the case of perfect competition, but we also know that consumers will derive some consumer surplus. This means that the monopolist could charge an extra price on top of the current unit price in order to extract additional consumer surplus. As long as this extra fee is not bigger than the consumer surplus, then consumers will be willing to purchase the goods. So a fixed fee will never cause any loss in customers, and if each customer is exactly the same, then they will pay a slightly higher price, but they will accept the deal, and the monopolist will then increase its profits. That implies, of course, that consumers all have the same preferences, which means that if you sell to Mr. 1 or if you sell to Mr. 2, they're going to buy the exact same quantity. They are going to derive the same consumer surplus, so you can charge them the same fee and they will both accept the deal. If consumers are different, you might charge a fee on top of the unit price, which won't be a good deal for some consumers and they will not purchase. Of course, it's an extreme case. It definitely doesn't happen in real life, but it is a way to fix ideas and to see how the monopolist can increase profits. This is also tightly related to the concept of first degree price discrimination. We saw that in the case of first degree price discrimination, the monopolist is able to extract the full surplus from every consumer. Consumers could have a different willingness to pay, different preferences, or different demand function. The monopolist is able in this case to charge a different price to each. If first degree price discrimination is not possible, then the monopolist might not be able to charge a different price to each consumer. Rather, it will have to charge the same price to each of them. But if they all have the same preferences, then the monopolist can use that to extract additional surplus on top of a per unit price. That was a more theoretical question. Now let's get into some real-life examples. So, identify the type of price discrimination, direct, indirect, maybe perfect, if any, and explain. Nightclubs often have something called Ladies' Night. It is a precise night where only ladies are allowed into the club, or sometimes ladies get some discounts at the entrance or when purchasing drinks. That will be direct price discrimination. The monopolist, or the nightclub in this case, would have a way to distinguish between two types of customers, men versus women. Then, knowing who is a man, who is a woman, the nightclub can charge a different price depending on the gender of the customer. However, note that the reason behind this type of price discrimination might not be to just extract more consumer surplus. Rather, it might be to maintain a certain balance between men and women, so that men keep coming and men in general are the ones with a lower elasticity of demand. Men in general are attracted by, prefer to go to nightclubs where there are women. So nightclubs might propose favorable tariffs and prices to women to attract them, so that as a consequence, more men will come as well. Car insurance companies charging car drivers different rates depending on the driver's age and the make of a car. It could be the age, the experience, the quality of the car, and many other criteria. I will actually talk about such a case towards the end of the semester, once I talk about adverse selection in insurance markets. Turns out that this is probably not price discrimination. Remember, price discrimination consists in exploiting different elasticities from different consumers in order to increase profits by extracting more consumer surplus. Here, an insurance company who charges a higher price to a certain consumer is going to reflect the fact that that consumer might be more likely to get into an accident. An insurance company works as follows. A customer pays the insurance company a fixed amount every year, and if something bad happens to the customer, then the insurance company will compensate the customer for a certain portion of the loss. For instance, car insurance. You pay your car insurance every month or every year, and if you get into a car accident, the insurance company will cover some of the expenses. So, ideally, insurance company would like to select drivers or any type of customers who are not exposed to any risk, or as little risk as possible. But if a customer comes in and he happens to be highly susceptible to a disease or a car accident, then the insurance company will increase its price to reflect the fact that it is more likely to have to pay the customer back within the year. So the point is not really to extract more consumer surplus. It's not really a matter of looking at which customer has a higher elasticity or a lower elasticity of demand. Rather, it is a way to reflect the increase in the price reflects the high expected cost of dealing with that customer. So the idea is that the product is not homogeneous. The services that the car insurance is going to offer is not homogeneous. It will depend on the type of customer. Financial aid for lower income students at colleges and universities. Personally, I know many people back home in France that benefited from financial aid because their family had a relatively low income. In this case, those students were waived and they didn't have to pay any tuition fees, or maybe only a partial amount. That would be direct price discrimination or third degree price discrimination. If you want to get a deduction on your or a discount on your tuition fees, then you will have to prove that you are part of a low income household. But here again, the objective is not really to extract consumer surplus, but rather to redistribute income, and in general to help lower income students get a college education. What about mail-in rebates for consumer products? So sometimes consumers get some flyers, some advertisements from different stores, in general grocery stores. And sometimes some consumers can gather rebates that they can redeem at the store to benefit from some sort of a discount. The idea here is to select customers who are going to take the time to gather those flyers, to look for discounts, and which are going to use them. In general, consumers who take the time and the effort to mail in the rebate form, to say, I want to get a rebate, should have a lower income or a higher elasticity of demand. The ones who take the time to file a form to get a discount are the ones who are very sensitive to prices. So it is a way to select those customers and to make sure that those customers buy from your store versus another store. It is pretty close to the next example, which is air miles at Safeway, which I'm going to get to in a minute. What about Boxing Day sales? Boxing Day, which is December 26th, I believe, the day after Christmas, is a huge day of sales. That's probably indirect price discrimination, because again, the point of the sales is to attract customers who are looking for deals. Consumers who rather avoid the Boxing Day rush and prefer buying in an orderly manner with attentive sales people and no queues have a higher willingness to pay, a less elastic demand. The ones who don't really care about sales because they don't want to be in the rush, they don't want to fight to get an item at a clothing store, those are the ones with a lower elasticity of demand. They're willing to pay a higher price if they can maybe shop quietly, or if they can shop at other times of the year. The ones who are hunting for deals are going to be the ones who will rush to the store on December 26th to benefit from sales. Air miles at Safeway is pretty much the same thing. It is another form of indirect price discrimination. The objective is to make consumers with high demand elasticity loyal to the store. Those are the ones who might go to another store if the price is too high. In order to keep them at your store, you can make them more loyal by proposing them some kind of a fidelity program. Air miles at Safeway, I believe Save-On also has a fidelity program, and so on and so forth. The idea is that the more they buy from Safeway, the more points they accumulate, and they can redeem those points to benefit from discounts. So they want to make sure that the customers which are very sensitive to increases in the price will still purchase from the store. The other ones that don't really bother collecting points or having an air mile card will just shop at Safeway the usual way. They have a lower elasticity of demand or a higher willingness to pay in general. Note that I talked about indirect price discrimination 3 times in a row. Remember that indirect price discrimination consists in proposing different menus of options to customers, and they will choose the option they prefer. Here, you have air miles versus no air miles, or rebates versus no rebates, or sales on Boxing Day, or no sales the rest of the year. Firms are not able to tell exactly which customer is what type. They cannot tell whenever something gets in the store, they cannot tell whether this one is the one hunting for good deals, or if it's somebody who just wants to buy his good, doesn't really care about the price, and just wants to go home. So they propose these 2 different options to see who is willing to go as far as collecting points, or filling a rebate form, or someone who's willing to fight during Boxing Day. What about dinner prices versus lunch prices? Dinner prices in general are higher than lunch prices, even in the same restaurant, even for the same dish. Well, there are many things at play here, so it's actually uncertain. On one hand, willingness to pay is higher for dinners as opposed to lunches in general. The idea is that lunches are generally in the middle of a day of work, so there's less time, there's less interest. Many people just care about getting some food through the system and go back to work, whereas people who sit down for dinner tend to spend more time at dinner. This also happens during leisure time, so they are usually willing to indulge more. So, on one hand, higher prices could reflect a higher willingness to pay, so that would be indirect price discrimination. But on the other hand, lower prices for lunch could be the result of some sort of competition with other restaurants and the availability of substitutes such as eating at the office. If you can eat at the office quickly in 30 minutes, then firms who want to compete with that will have to propose good prices around lunchtime. There's also another aspect to it, is that customers on average spend more time having dinner than they do having lunch. It means that they sit in for a longer time, so they take an available spot for a longer time, which means that there might be less customers overall. So, as a consequence, restaurants might increase the price of dinners to reflect the fact that their consumers are staying for a longer time. So it's not clear. Is it a question of willingness to pay? Is it a question of it is more costly to make dinners than lunches because people stay for longer and we can only take so many customers? Or is it to compete with all the other lunch options? Could be a bit of the three. Premium pricing. Some goods are priced way higher than their marginal cost of production, and they are sold alongside a similar product, which is usually sold for cheaper. It could be some sort of price discrimination, maybe indirect, to reveal the customer's willingness to pay. You can either buy a good or the premium version of it. It could be contained in a nicer box, it could contain extra feature, but overall the good would be, both goods would have the same purpose. The thing with premium pricing is that the goods are not exactly the same. The premium good is going to have the nice box, is going to have maybe extra features on top. So here, the product is not really homogeneous. The one said to be premium is also likely to be more costly to produce. If you have to produce a big box on top, if you have to add a couple of sprinkles, something nice, extra feature, an extra steelbook or things like that, then it will also be more costly. But you can already guess that most of the time, the cost of making those extra premium items is way lower than the difference in the price between the regular version and the premium version. So firms definitely want to exploit high willingness to pay of maybe some of some customers who maybe want to collect, have a high valuation for the good and for everything around it, because they charge a price which is way higher than the increase in the cost. If both goods serve the same exact purpose, the premium version, which includes extra features, is a way to sort out consumers which are willing to pay more as they get a higher utility from the consumption of the initial good. Collector editions are an example of such goods. I just mentioned steelbooks. This is typically something we see in collector edition of some video games. You could either buy the video game now in digital. You could also buy it in CD form with a box with maybe a description book and so on. And there's always a collector's edition that contains maybe an extra steelbook, maybe a poster, maybe some stickers. Sometimes they even include a big figurine of the main character of the game. This is aimed at targeting collectioners. At the same time, the good is not exactly the same. They modify the good a bit to exploit higher willingnesses to pay. So the answer here would be kind of uncertain. Now, in the last exercise, we are going to look at the principle of second-degree price discrimination. In the lecture, we talked about Tim Horton's BOGO strategy. Buy one, get one 50% off. The idea is that there are different types of consumers, the hungry ones, the not hungry ones, and Tim Hortons is not able to tell who is hungry and who is not. So Tim Hortons is going to propose different options, and hungry customers will pick one option, and not hungry customers will pick another option. Of course, Tim Hortons doesn't have only 2 different options. They have plenty more. They have the breakfast combo. They have the lunch combo. They have some coffee something something combo. They have 2 breakfast sandwiches, sometimes for $5. It's a discount they have on a regular basis. What are the main features of second-degree price discrimination? I just gave you this example in the class because the actual theory involves more math. But intuition, you will see, is pretty straightforward and pretty powerful. So, the monopolist cannot tell customers apart, so it decides to design, let's say, 3 bundles that will target each type. And let's explain the main features of those bundles. The first feature that you will always see is the feature called no distortion at the top. So the package, the bundle that is going to target the consumer with the highest willingness to pay, contains the efficient quantity. It contains the quantity such that price equals marginal cost. The price of the bundle will not be equal to marginal cost. It only includes the quantity such that price is equal to marginal cost. So imagine the perfect competition quantity. This is what will go in this bundle. This is what we say, no distortion at the top. The top, I mean the highest willingness to pay consumer, will not see any distortion, will not see any change in the quantity proposed for his bundle. That's the first feature. The second feature is that every other package, so packages that bundles that target every other type of consumer, will feature a lower quantity than the efficient one. And the idea is pretty sneaky. The idea is to make those packages less attractive to consumers with a higher willingness to pay. This way, the monopolist can charge a higher price to consumers with a high willingness to pay because the other bundles are too bad. As an example, think about phone carriers. They don't propose cheap plans because they're going to tell you something like, we have a plan for every budget. It's not that they want everybody to buy. It's that they want to make sure that consumers who need a minimum amount of features will buy the more expensive bundle because the cheap bundle is too bad for them. So, for instance, if you think about Koodo or Fido, phone carriers in Canada, they have a plan which is priced at $15 a month. It consists in only texting or only calls, you choose. There are no data. If you want to have both calls and texts and you want to add some data, you're going to have to start paying, I believe, $26 or something like that. The idea of making the first plan cheap, $15, is that anybody who needs a minimum amount of data will have to pay the package at the bundle, the plan, priced at $26. It's not that they want to attract low budgets. They don't care so much about low budgets. They sell the plan for $15, they don't make a lot of money on them. They make more money on customers who want data, who want calls, international calls, or international texts, or extra features. Now, they even include plans where you pay for your phone on a monthly basis. For instance, instead of paying $26 a month for your plan and have your own phone and pay your phone before, you could pay, let's say, half of the phone the day you get the plan, and then every month the carrier takes $5 additional from your plan that are going to be used to pay for the rest of your phone. So instead of paying $26 a month, you might pay $31 a month until the phone is fully paid. It is the same if you think about airplane seats. Back in the 60s and the 70s, planes had the same type of seats. You couldn't have, there was no such thing as economy class versus business class versus first class. All seats were the same quality, some sort of an average quality. What I saw over time, airline companies, is that some people are willing to pay a higher price than others for different reasons. People like businessmen who are flying every other day will not stay in economy class for a long time because they spend a lot of time in the plane and they might want to get more space, more leg room, more features. So those ones will be willing to pay an extra amount of money to get a nice seat in business class. Casual travelers who travel maybe once a year or something like that will probably go for the cheapest ticket. Now, the economy class tickets, the economy class seats, are worse than the seats that used to be sold back in the 60s and in the 70s. So they went from an average quality seat to very bad seats and very good seats. The idea is that everybody who is a bit on the fence, maybe they had an average seat, by making the economy class seats very, very bad, will prefer to buy the first class or the business class tickets. The other ones, anyway, would purchase the cheapest tickets. So they make cheap bundles bad on purpose to make sure that people with high willingnesses to pay won't go for these bundles. This is why we have downward distortion at the bottom. And this could be the quality of a product, like seats, or it could be the quantity of the bundle, like the amount of data you have access to with the phone carrier, or the number of minutes you have with calls, or the number of texts you can use every month. Consumers with the lowest willingness to pay end up with no net surplus. The idea is that the cheapest bundle will be just enough to make the lowest willingness to pay consumers buy and nothing more. They don't need any extra surplus. So those consumers will be indifferent between buying the cheapest bundle or not buying at all. Of course, they will definitely not want to buy the more expensive bundles. And in general, in theory, we assume that if they are indifferent, they could either go for one or the other. We usually assume they are going to buy. But in this case, you can always decrease the price of the bundle by a cent, and in theory, those consumers will strictly prefer to buy versus not buy. The high willingness to pay consumers, the ones that the monopolist is really targeting, will end up with a positive surplus. The idea is that they know they are high willingness to pay customers, but the monopolist doesn't. The fact that this information is kept by consumers will allow them to buy a bundle and still get some consumer surplus out of it. We actually call this information rent. Overall, because most of the bundles feature the non-efficient quantity, the outcome is inefficient. Monopolists, however, can extract more surplus by applying second-degree price discrimination than by applying linear pricing or uniform pricing. Second-degree price discrimination is something we see everywhere. If you go to the grocery store, you can buy a bottle of Coke alone, or you can buy a six-pack. Same with alcohol. Same with cigarettes. You can buy a regular pack, or you can buy a big bundle of, I believe it's 20 or 30 packs. No, maybe 10. I forgot. The idea is to propose different bundles so that consumers with different willingnesses to pay will select themselves by choosing one bundle over another. They will reveal which type of customers they are once they get to the cashier with their bundle. So let's summarize the whole thing about price discrimination. We distinguished three types of price discrimination. First degree price discrimination is called perfect price discrimination. In this case, the firm knows exactly the willingness to pay of each customer and is able to charge a different price to each of them to fully extract their consumer surplus. When this happens, consumers are indifferent between buying at the price that the firm is imposing or not buying. In real life, this is impossible. It is an ideal kind of case for a firm, but in real life, firms have no way to know willingnesses to pay of people individually. If they asked, consumers would never report the exact willingness to pay. They would always report something smaller. And anyway, it is not allowed by law because there are many ways to justify this type of pricing by some sort of illegal discrimination. After all, a consumer could always say, why do I have to pay a higher price than this person? Is it because I'm a man? Is it because I'm white? Is it because I am religious? Or anything like this. Note, however, that if perfect price discrimination was possible and allowed, then the outcome would be efficient. We saw that in this case, the firm will sell the efficient quantity to each customer, and by extracting all of the surplus, consumers will end up with no surplus, firms will end up with all of the surplus, but there will not be any deadweight loss. So technically, it is Pareto efficient, although consumers end up with nothing. Second degree price discrimination, also called indirect price discrimination, is way more realistic. It consists in knowing that consumers are different, but not being able to tell who is what type. In this case, the firm just proposes different bundles, and the consumer is going to select which bundle is the best for him. The firm is going to design the bundles such that each type of customer will choose a specific bundle, and by choosing that bundle, the customer at the cashier will reveal what type he is. That's why it's indirect. Third degree price discrimination, also called direct price discrimination, is more straightforward and is very widespread. The firm in this case is able to tell consumers apart and is able to charge a different price. Typically, discount prices for elders or for students versus working adults, or discounted prices for kids, or what else can I think of? Usually it's based on age, student status, many cases like that. So in this case, the firm is able to tell, oh, you are a student, so you can pay this lower price, as long as the student can prove he or she is a student. The idea behind this form of price discrimination is to extract more consumer surplus by exploiting different elasticities. Students have a higher elasticity of demand than working adults. So, by proposing a lower price to students, students will purchase more. And on the other hand, the firm can also charge a higher price to working adults because they probably have a lower elasticity of demand. First degree price discrimination is efficient, although not very fair. Second degree is inefficient. Third degree is inefficient. But there are cases where welfare overall can increase from price discrimination. If the current strategy is uniform pricing, moving from uniform pricing to some form of price discrimination can sometimes increase everybody's surplus. I am specifically thinking about the case of third-degree price discrimination. If the overall quantity sold increases by applying third-degree price discrimination, then welfare, total surplus, overall will increase. Consumers with a low elasticity of demand or a high willingness to pay might suffer because they might have to pay a higher price. But consumers with a higher elasticity of demand or a lower willingness to pay will benefit from price discrimination. And of course, the firm will benefit from price discrimination as well. Remember that some students would not go to the movie theater if they didn't have discounted prices. Now that they have discounted prices, they might decide to go to the movie theater, which is more profits for the movie theater. That's it for this tutorial on price discrimination. Have a good rest of your week, and see you in the next one. Bye.